I used to think pain was just part of growing up. I mean, doesn't everyone feel tired all the time? Doesn't everyone get weird aches, random dizziness, and that constant buzzing in the back of their mind like something's wrong, but they just can't explain what? That's what I told myself, anyway. Because if I didn't normalize it, I would have had to face the truth that maybe my body was trying to tell me something. Something big. And nobody around me was listening. Especially not my family. My name's Alyssa. I'm 17. I go to a public high school in Oregon, and I used to be what you'd call a quiet achiever. I got decent grades, helped out around the house, didn't cause drama. But starting around sophomore year, something started changing. Subtle at first. Like the way my legs would tremble after walking up a flight of stairs. Or how my hands would go numb when I was holding a pen too long. Then it was the headaches. The fatigue. The nausea. The mental fog. One by one, like puzzle pieces I didn't know how to arrange. At first, I tried to ignore it. Who wants to be the kid always complaining? Especially in my house. My parents were the kind of people who believed hard work fixed everything. My dad worked 12-hour shifts in construction and still came home to mow the lawn, fix leaky pipes, and cook dinner sometimes. My mom? She was the never sick a day in her life type. Ran PTA meetings, volunteered at church, and baked for the neighbors, all while running a small online business from home. So when I said, "Mom, I don't feel right," I wasn't expecting sympathy. But I wasn't expecting what she said either. "Maybe if you didn't sleep all day and spend your nights on that phone, you'd feel better," she snapped without looking up from her laptop. "You're just out of shape, Alyssa. It's not that deep." I hadn't even touched my phone all day. My head was pounding. I felt like gravity was 10 times heavier on my body. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded, like I always did. That became the pattern. I'd try to speak up. She'd shut it down. My dad? He'd barely glance up from the TV and mumble, "Probably just hormones. She's 17. It's normal." My younger brother, Connor, joked that I was turning into a sloth and laughed when I missed another soccer tryout because my legs wouldn't stop shaking. I felt invisible, like I was screaming in a room full of people and no one even flinched. One day, I stayed home from school after waking up with what felt like 100-pound weight on my chest. I couldn't lift my arms without shaking. I texted my mom and said, "Can we please go to the doctor?" She came into my room, looked around at the clothes on my floor and the dark curtains I'd drawn shut, and sighed like she was tired of me. "You're not sick, Alyssa. You're depressed because you sit in this dark cave all day and don't do anything. I'm not taking you to the doctor because you need discipline, not medication." That was the day I stopped asking. I started hiding it better. Smiling through the exhaustion. Pretending my vision wasn't blurring in math class. Laughing off my brain fog as forgetfulness. And on the days I couldn't fake it, I just told my teachers I hadn't slept well or had a migraine. Nobody ever questioned it. After all, I looked fine. But I wasn't. And one morning, everything came crashing down. It was a Thursday. I remember because I had an AP English quiz and I'd stayed up all night trying to prepare, even though my body felt like it was screaming at me to rest. I skipped breakfast because I felt nauseous. My hands were trembling so badly I couldn't put on eyeliner. I thought maybe it was just nerves. But when I stood up in the hallway at school and took 3 steps toward my locker, I felt the world spin like a broken carousel. The last thing I remember is someone shouting my name as the floor came up fast beneath me. Then everything went black. When I woke up, everything felt muffled, like I was underwater and voices were trying to reach me through thick glass. My eyes blinked open slowly to the glow of fluorescent lights. There were machines beeping beside me and a nurse adjusting something near my fore. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. But then I saw my mom sitting in the corner of the hospital room, arms folded tight against her chest, eyes red. My dad stood beside her, rubbing his temples like he'd been there a while. And my younger brother? He wasn't even in the room. Probably at school or home, playing Xbox, not realizing his sister had just collapsed in the middle of the hallway like her body had finally given up. The nurse smiled when she saw me stirring. "Hey there, sweetheart. You're in the hospital, but you're okay. You passed out at school, and they brought you in. Just relax. The doctor will be here in a few." My throat was dry. My body ached in a way I couldn't even explain. But even worse than the physical pain was the look on my mom's face. Not panic. Not sympathy. Guilt. It flickered across her face for just a second before she pulled her mask of indifference back on. When the doctor finally came in, a younger woman named Dr. Reyes, she pulled the curtain close behind her and looked down at her clipboard. "Hi, Alyssa. I'm glad you're awake. We've done some preliminary tests and your blood work's showing a few concerning patterns. Your electrolyte levels are abnormal, your blood pressure is inconsistent, and your heart rate keeps dropping too low and then spiking again." My mom shifted in her chair. "So, what? She fainted because she skipped breakfast?" She's been complaining about feeling off for months, but honestly, I thought it was just a teenage phase. The doctor looked directly at her and said something that made my heart stop. "Well, actually, we think Alyssa might have a rare autoimmune disorder. Possibly something called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS for short. It's part of a group of conditions known as dysautonomia." I stared at her, trying to process what that meant. A real condition? A name? Something that explained why my body had been betraying me for the past year. I expected my mom to ask questions, to lean in and demand to know more about this diagnosis. But she didn't. She just said, flatly, "She's always been dramatic. Are you sure this isn't just stress?" Dr. Reyes's eyes narrowed. "We've done a tilt table test, monitored her vitals, and reviewed her symptoms. This isn't in her head. This is medical. And frankly, based on her symptoms, I'm surprised she wasn't diagnosed sooner." That's when my dad finally spoke. "So, what do we do now?" Dr. Reyes sighed. "She'll need to make some lifestyle adjustments. A high-sodium diet, compression garments, careful hydration, and possibly medication to regulate her heart rate. But what she really needs, more than anything, is support. Support. The one thing I hadn't had in so long, I forgot what it even felt like." When the doctor left the room, I looked at my mom. "Did you hear her? I'm not lazy. I'm not faking this." She didn't say anything at first. Then finally, in a voice colder than I expected, she muttered, "Don't act like you've been suffering in silence. If this was that serious, we would have noticed." I felt like I'd been slapped. "You did notice," I whispered. "You just didn't believe me." For the next few days, I stayed in the hospital while they monitored my vitals and started me on treatment. Nurses explained what POTS was, how it affects the autonomic nervous system, making it hard for my body to regulate things like heart rate, blood pressure, and temperature. It wasn't a death sentence, but it was life-altering. And I'd been living with it untreated for almost a year. When my friends at school found out, I got a few texts, some get-well-soon messages, but no one really understood. They thought I just fainted from stress or skipped lunch. They didn't know I'd been silently screaming for help for months. And then, something strange happened. One night, while my dad was at work and my mom thought I was asleep, I overheard her talking on the phone outside my hospital room. I didn't think it would ever show up. The doctor said it might skip her entirely. She was fine for so long, I thought. The voice on the other end was muffled, but my mom's next words froze me in place. "No, I didn't tell her. I didn't want her to live in fear her whole life thinking she'd get sick like my sister did. It ruined our family then, and I wasn't going to let it ruin ours." She paused. "Well, I guess it's too late now." My heart dropped. She knew. She knew this might happen. And she didn't just ignore me. She actively hid it from me. That night, I lay in my hospital bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. My mom had a sister? Someone who had this disease? Someone who maybe could have warned me? Someone who could have made me feel less crazy? All I could think was, why? Why would she lie? Why would she let me suffer? The truth was clawing its way out now, and I knew I couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. Not anymore. The only thing more painful than my diagnosis was realizing that the person who was supposed to protect me had chosen silence instead. The next morning, I didn't wait for the nurse or the doctor to come in. I didn't scroll through my phone or stare out the window like I'd done every day since being admitted. Instead, I waited for my mom to walk through the door with her lukewarm hospital coffee and her stiff, forced smile. When she did, I sat up straighter in bed and said 4 words I never thought I'd say to her. I heard everything last night. She froze mid-step, her face draining of color like she knew exactly what I meant. She set the coffee on the windowsill and didn't even try to pretend. For once, she didn't deflect. She just whispered, "You weren't supposed to." I stared at her. You knew. This wasn't some random, impossible to diagnose mystery illness. You knew there was a chance I could have this. You knew and you let me suffer anyway. She sank into the chair beside me like the weight of the truth finally crushed her. My sister, your aunt, Lillian, she was diagnosed with POTS when she was 16. She began slowly, her voice cracking. She was athletic, like you. Bright. Always moving. Always laughing. Then suddenly, she wasn't. One day she fainted at track practice, and everything spiraled after that. My parents didn't know what to do. Back then, no one knew much about it. Doctors dismissed her, said it was anxiety, hormones, attention seeking. Just like we did with you. I clenched the blanket in my fists. So you recognized it. The fainting, the fatigue. All of it. And instead of helping me, you lied. I didn't lie, she snapped, then caught herself. Her voice softened. I didn't want you to carry the fear. Watching Lillian deteriorate, watching my family fall apart, it was horrifying. She spent years in and out of hospitals, lost all her friends, missed prom, barely graduated. It broke my parents. They fought constantly about how to fix her. My dad left. My mom shut down. It was like Lillian's illness swallowed everything. And I promised myself I'd never let that happen again. So you thought pretending it didn't exist would protect me? I whispered, voice trembling. I kept telling you something was wrong, and you told me I was lazy. You grounded me for missing school. You said I was embarrassing you. She looked away, silent. And all the while, you knew. You watched your own sister go through this. You had every chance to catch it early, and you still didn't listen. Tears slipped down her cheek. I was scared. Well, guess what? I said, louder than I meant to. I was scared too. For months. Every time I stood up too fast and nearly passed out. Every time my chest hurt and I thought I was having a heart attack. Every time I couldn't explain why my body felt like it was shutting down, and you made me feel like it was all in my head. She reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. Don't, I said. Not yet. Silence settled between us like a thick fog. For a moment, all I heard was the hum of machines and my own racing thoughts. Finally, she cleared her throat. There's something else you need to know. I didn't respond, but I didn't stop her either. She reached into her purse and pulled out an old envelope, yellowed with time, slightly torn at the edges. She handed it to me without a word. Inside was a faded photo. 2 teenage girls, one who looked unmistakably like a younger version of my mom, and another with softer eyes, sun-kissed skin, and a beaming smile. That's Lillian, my mom said. And this was taken a year before she disappeared. My heart stuttered. Disappeared? She couldn't take it anymore. My mom whispered. The pain. The isolation. The way people looked at her like she was faking it. She ran away when she was 19. Left a note saying she didn't want to be a burden anymore. I clutched the photo, staring at the girl who might have been my mirror if I'd been born a generation earlier. The resemblance was haunting. You never found her? She shook her head. My mom spent years trying. She filed police reports, talked to private investigators. Nothing. She just vanished. I swallowed hard, throat dry. And you thought if you ignored it, you could outrun the same thing happening again. She nodded slowly. But I was wrong. So wrong. That night, when she went home and I was alone with my thoughts, I stared at the picture of Lillian for hours. I thought about what it must have been like for her, fighting something no one believed, watching her body betray her, being treated like a problem instead of a person. And I realized something terrifying. I was on the exact same path. If I didn't speak up, if I didn't own this diagnosis and force the people around me to see me, really see me, I'd end up like Lillian. A photo in an envelope. A name people whispered about. But I didn't want to vanish. I wanted to be heard. So the next morning, I made a decision. When the nurse came in with the usual breakfast tray, I asked her if the hospital had a support group or anything for teens dealing with chronic illness. She looked surprised but smiled. Actually, we do. Thursday afternoons. I can add your name. I nodded. Please do. Later that day, a girl about my age peeked her head into my room. She had curly brown hair and wore a hoodie that read, "Dysautonomia doesn't define me." "You Alyssa?" she asked. "Yeah." She stepped in and grinned. "Heard you're joining the chronic illness crew." "I'm Danny. I've got EDS and POTS. It sucks, but the club's not all bad." It was the first time I didn't feel totally alone. As we talked, something inside me shifted. This diagnosis didn't have to be the end of my life. Maybe. It was just the beginning of a different kind of strength. Leaving the hospital didn't feel like a victory. It felt like stepping back into a world that didn't believe me. The fluorescent lights of the school hallways were just as blinding. The murmurs were just as loud. People stared like I was a ghost, half of them curious, the other half suspicious. I wasn't surprised. News travels fast when someone collapses in the middle of class and gets carried away on a stretcher. Especially when that someone is the lazy girl who always had an excuse to skip gym and fail her math tests. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that everything had changed. And I wasn't going to hide anymore. I walked slower than usual, gripping the hallway rails they'd installed per my accommodation plan. I hated that I needed them. Hated the way my legs trembled after just one flight of stairs. Hated the way my heart raced from the cafeteria to the nurse's office. But I kept walking, one foot in front of the other. Because this time, I had the truth behind me. In second period, Mr. Carlson, the same teacher who once mocked me for napping in class, cleared his throat and handed me my makeup work with a softer look in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Alyssa," he said, low enough so the class wouldn't hear. I didn't understand. I should have. I should have tried harder. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and took the packet. Forgiveness wasn't a light switch. Not for him. Not for my mom. Not even for myself. At lunch, I sat alone, partly by choice, partly because no one knew what to say to me. I scrolled through my phone to avoid their eyes. That's when I saw it. An Instagram DM from a name I didn't recognize. It was just one line. "I knew your story sounded familiar. I think I knew your Aunt Lillian." My hands froze mid-scroll. My heart skipped. I clicked the profile. No picture. Just a username, at not a lost cause. I stared at the screen, unsure whether to delete it or reply. But curiosity and something deeper, something almost familiar, won out. "How?" The reply came a minute later. "I can't say here. Not yet. But I knew her back when she was sick. And I think she might still be alive." I blinked, pulse thudding in my ears. Was this some twisted joke? "Are you sure?" My mom said she disappeared. She did. But she wasn't gone. She just had to start over. She was tired of not being believed. Tired of being blamed. You probably understand that better than anyone. My throat tightened. Are you saying she faked her death or something? No, I'm saying she survived in the only way she could. She's been watching from a distance. And I think she's been waiting for the right time to reach out. Maybe that time is now. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. The thought of Lillian still being out there, still alive, blew a hole straight through the grief I didn't even realize I'd inherited. Can you prove it? I'll try. Meet me Saturday. Elmwood Cafe, 3 p.m. Ask for Rose. Saturday came faster than I expected. I almost didn't go. Part of me was terrified it was some kind of scam. Another part was terrified it wasn't. When I got there, the cafe was almost empty except for a woman sitting near the back with a knit cardigan, 2 steaming mugs of tea, and a nervous smile. She looked up as I approached. Alyssa? I nodded. She stood and motioned for me to sit. I'm Rose. She was in her mid-30s, maybe early 40s, with eyes that held too much history. You knew my aunt? I asked, skeptical but hopeful. She smiled faintly. I know her. Present tense. My breath caught. She lives about 30 minutes from here. Quiet little town, off the radar. She changed her name, kept a low profile. But when I saw your story, your collapse, your diagnosis, I recognized the signs. And I recognized your face. She pulled out a worn Polaroid. It was Lillian again. Older, but unmistakably her. Standing beside Rose. Smiling. I gasped. So she's really alive? Rose nodded. She's alive. And she's been following your journey ever since your mom posted about your diagnosis. She wanted to come see you, but she's scared. Scared of what? Of being the wound your mom never healed from. Of being the ghost that still haunts your family. I sat back in the chair, stunned. My mom never talks about her. Like ever. She wouldn't. They had a huge fight before Lillian left. Words were said. Regrets were buried. Your mom was just a teenager too, trying to hold everything together while watching her sister fall apart. Tears welled in my eyes. But if she knew Lillian was alive, why wouldn't she tell me? Because she doesn't. Lillian never told her where she went. Only I knew. Then why now? Because she saw you. She saw the strength in your voice. The way you demanded answers. The way you stood up for yourself when no one else would. And it reminded her of herself before she ran. I wiped my eyes. Can I meet her? Rose nodded. That's why I'm here. 2 days later, I found myself standing outside a small brick house with blue shutters and wind chimes that sang in the breeze. My hands shook as I knocked. The door opened slowly. And there she was. Lillian. Older. Wiser. But still her. She didn't say anything at first. Just stared at me with wide, trembling eyes. Then, she whispered, You look just like her. Like your mom. But you're fire. That's mine. I laughed through my tears. I think I'm a little of both. She opened her arms. I stepped in. And for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged to something deeper than pain. I belonged to a story I hadn't even known was being written. We sat on her porch for hours, talking about everything, her illness, her escape, her survival, how she rebuilt her life, how she grieved from a distance, and most of all, how proud she was of me. She looked me in the eye and said, You're not just surviving this, Alyssa. You're changing it. Every time you speak up, every time you refuse to be dismissed, you're doing what I couldn't. I didn't respond. I just held her hand and let her words sink into the cracks my illness had left behind. I didn't know how to start the conversation. How do you ask your mom if she's been hiding a living, breathing secret sibling from you? How do you even begin to talk about betrayal, about legacy, about illness that runs deeper than blood? I stood in the living room, watching her fold laundry like it was just any other Tuesday. But everything had changed. Mom, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk? She looked up from a stack of towels, her face unreadable. Sure, baby. What's going on? I hesitated. My throat went dry. I saw Lillian. The towel slipped from her hands. She froze. I watched every muscle in her face tighten, eyes darting to the side like she might pretend she didn't hear me. "What did you just say?" she whispered. "I saw her. I met her. She's alive, Mom. She's been alive this whole time." She sat down on the couch like her legs couldn't hold her up anymore. I waited. I let the silence sit heavy between us. "How?" she finally asked. "Rose found me. She told me everything. That Lillian left because no one believed her. That she was sick, just like me. And you fought with her. You told her to suck it up. You called her dramatic." My mom flinched like the words physically struck her. "I didn't know she was still alive," she said softly. "I swear to you, Alyssa, I thought she was gone. She just left. After that last fight, she never came back. No calls. No letters. Nothing." "Why didn't you tell me about her?" My voice cracked. "Why did you let me think I was crazy? Like I was just broken or lazy? You knew how she struggled. Didn't you see it happening all over again with me?" Tears streamed down her face. "Because I couldn't face it," she sobbed. "Because when you started showing the same symptoms, I thought it was my fault. That I'd cursed you. That I'd done something wrong. And I couldn't admit to myself that it was happening again. That I failed you like I failed her." I knelt down in front of her, grabbing her shaking hands. "Mom, I needed you to believe me. I needed you with me. Not against me." She nodded, choking on her own guilt. "I was scared, but that's no excuse. I failed both of you." I looked into her eyes and said the one thing that took all my strength to say. "Then stop running from it. Come with me. Meet her. Talk to her. Heal this before we let another 20 years pass." She stared at me like she couldn't believe what I was offering. But then, she nodded. The meeting between my mom and Lillian was not a tearful, movie-perfect reunion. It was messy. There were long silences, shaky apologies, guarded glances, and moments where either one could have walked away and never come back. But they stayed. They sat across from each other like two versions of the same story, one who ran and one who stayed. One who hid her pain behind silence, and one who turned it into rage. "I thought you hated me," Lillian said, her voice breaking. "The way you screamed at me that night. I was a scared kid who didn't know how to help you," my mom said. "But I never hated you. I hated what was happening to you. I hated that no one took you seriously. I hated that I couldn't fix it." They cried. Quietly. Together. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Over the next few months, my life shifted in ways I never could have imagined. My story, my real story, started to spread. What began as a journal I kept during treatment turned into a blog that caught attention. Then local news. Then health advocates. I was invited to speak on a panel for teens living with rare and invisible illnesses. People started writing to me, saying, "Your story is mine. My parents think I'm faking. My school won't listen. But you gave me hope." I wasn't alone anymore. Neither were they. One day, I sat with Lillian on her porch, something that had become a quiet ritual for us, and I asked her, "Do you regret disappearing?" She looked out over the trees, her fingers curled around a cup of tea. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But if I hadn't, I don't know if I would have survived." I understood that more than I wished I did. "But I'm here now," she added. "For you. For your mom. For whatever comes next." My mom came with me to every specialist appointment after that. She took notes, asked questions, fought for referrals. She even stood up to the insurance company when they tried to deny coverage for one of my treatments. She became the mom I always wanted to believe she could be. We still had hard days. We still had moments where I saw the shadows of doubt flicker in her eyes. But she worked at it. She showed up. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. I was invited to speak at my school's senior assembly. I almost said no. But then I remembered that scared version of me, curled up in bed, wondering if I was broken, wondering if it was all in my head, wondering if anyone would ever believe me. So I stood on that stage and told the truth about what it feels like to have your body betray you when no one can see it, about the shame of being called lazy, the guilt of missing out, the exhaustion of pretending everything is fine, about collapsing in front of your classmates and finally being believed too late. I told them about Lillian, about my mom, about how silence can feel safer than honesty. But healing only begins when someone finally listens. When I finished, the entire auditorium was quiet. Then they stood, one by one, not out of pity, but out of respect. Because I wasn't the dramatic girl anymore. I wasn't the excuse maker. I was the survivor. And now, I live with this disease every day. It's not a movie with a happy ending. Some days are good. Some are terrible. Some are in between. But I am no longer ashamed. I know who I am. And more importantly, I know I'm not alone. Because I made my pain visible. Because I demanded to be seen. Because I turned the thing that almost destroyed me into the reason someone else might finally be believed.